Hello, thank you for attending day 4 of Wellbeing Week in the Law programming. Today, it's Put Away Your Legal Pad, How to Stop Arguing Ourselves Out of Good Relationships. We have real-time CLE, Chris Osborne and Michael Kahn, who'll be joining us momentarily. We're also fortunate to have Wendy Osborne of Nurture Counseling. So I'm going to let them tell you more about their backgrounds and tell us more about how we can nurture our social relationships. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Nicole. And thanks to Anna Levine and the whole team at the New Jersey Lawyers Assistance Program. We really appreciate you guys working with us and sponsoring this program, getting everything set up. Looks like we have a few people still joining us. But we're going to go ahead and kind of motor through because we've got an hour here with you. And as people come in, we'll welcome them also. Welcome to this presentation, this program. This is one that exists because, not because I am the superhero of interpersonal communications as a lawyer. It's actually, this program exists because of my fumbles and foibles and failures in that regard that started probably about 20 years ago after my wife and I have been married probably 5 or 10 years. And one of the dynamics that we ran into frequently is my argumentativeness, in particular, being very well trained as a lawyer, very well trained in rhetoric and all the communication skills and things that we use and in our stock and trade. Sometimes that was not a helpful dynamic, as it turned out. Sometimes my argument mode was something that was counterproductive and certainly didn't come across to my spouse as a loving and helpful way of dealing with things. Now, lest you suspect me of providing a shinier and more self-glowing report on that, one of our participants today is my lovely wife, actually, Wendy Osborne, who is in fact, a mental health counselor. Some might say I drove her to that. I'm not sure, but she actually works with couples who deal with conflict all the time. And we actually will celebrate 30 years of marriage in August, thankfully, which we're grateful for. But there's some lessons and things we've learned along the way about how to navigate conflict and challenges and difficulties. We're also joined by one other person who will introduce himself in a moment, my partner in real-time creative learning experiences, and that's Michael Kahn. And Michael and I have been doing presentations for about 15 years on various topics related to lawyer well-being and how to function better as lawyers, both in our jobs, in our professions, but also in our personal lives, and the way that those two can sometimes blend over into one another. And so the topic today, you're aware of the way things are going to proceed. We're going to have sort of 3 segments. We're going to talk to start with about the unique challenges for lawyers in relationships. What is it that makes being a lawyer in a relationship or being in a relationship with a lawyer a little bit difficult, more difficult maybe than perhaps for folks in other jobs, disciplines, or professions? And especially, if it's mostly going to be lawyers probably on the call, and maybe we'll get some perspective on, what it's like for other people to be in relationship with us and what kind of things they say. And then we'll talk a little bit about rethinking relational conflict in general, especially if we're litigators. We deal with conflict all the time. It is sort of something that we're used to and we navigate most of the time. But relational conflict is different, and there can be some different purposes and different mindsets there. And sometimes making those shifts is a super helpful first step at helping those conflicts and conversations be less acrimonious and difficult and maybe even productive. And finally, we're going to talk about some methods of communication, some tips and strategies for more productive communication when you are in a conflict setting. But first, I'd love for Michael and Wendy just to pop in real quick and say hello, introduce yourself, and what gets you excited about this topic. But tell them what you do for a living as well, Michael, because I haven't got a chance to introduce yet.
All right. Hi, everybody. Sorry, was a bit late. I had a time zone issue. But I am a former lawyer, practice law in New Jersey, the Attorney General's office in Trenton for a few years, and went back to school, and I've been a counselor now since 1994. I work part-time at the Lawyer Assistance Program in British Columbia, in Vancouver. So, and I'm drawn to this topic because of certainly my own experiences with communication, or not so good communication in my own relationship. But I really enjoy working with couples in my practice and helping them with communication issues.
And Mike will tell you too, sometimes he and I argue, we sound kind of like a married couple
Ah.
occasionally. We've been
And
doing this for so long.
We finish sentences too, Chris, sometimes.
Exactly. And Wendy, say hello for just a second.
Yes, I'm Wendy Osborne, married to Chris. I have a counseling practice in Charlotte, North Carolina, where I see kids, adults, couples, family units. And I'm just really passionate about helping families flourish.
Awesome. Well, we're grateful that you guys are here, and we're super grateful that our listening audience is here. It looks like we're up to about 37 people, which is fantastic. We actually want this to be an interactive presentation. That's how Michael and I like to do our presentations. We think there's always lots of wisdom and certainly some interesting insights and thoughts that come from the people who attend. And so you will have a couple of opportunities and ways to do that. If you would please direct any questions that you have or any comments. If we ask for feedback, if we ask you to answer a question or report in on the topic we're talking about, use the Q&A function, please. Not the chat. The chat reserved for technical issues, technical things, and we speakers, panelists will communicate amongst ourselves for that. We will bring forth whatever comments you have or questions you have. Michael or Wendy or I will be monitoring that, and we hope you will contribute questions and also suggestions and ideas. We get some of our best learnings and some of our best takeaways from things that participants bring. And you never know, something you share might be super helpful to a peer of yours. We also have the opportunity to participate in some polls. And I'd love for you all to actually do this with us right now. Hopefully you can see the instructions on the screen where I'm screen sharing. If you can't, I'll talk through it as well. If you'll take either your phone or on your laptop, you can do the same thing, or on your computer, and go to PollEv, that's P-O-L-L, like polling place, PollEv, EV, short for everywhere.com. Go to pollev.com, and then you type in my name, Chris Osborne, with all lowercase letters, CHRISOSBORN 915. And don't try the text. The text function doesn't work as well, unfortunately. It's up there, but I've had people have a lot of frustration with that. Go to pollev.com and answer the question that I've got. You'll see it on the screen. You'll see it on your phone. What are the unique challenges that lawyers often have in interpersonal relationships? We want to hear from you. What do you think makes it sometimes harder as a lawyer to navigate interpersonal relationships? As you type in those answers, they'll show up here and add to our word cloud here. There we go, time. And that means several people are already responding to it. The bigger and more central that a word is, the more people are choosing it and adding it to the mix. And so if everybody would do that right now, I'd love to just get your impressions of what other kind of things do you run into. Shifting. Let's see, and meanness, by the way, I just threw that in there when we were testing it out. So nobody really is saying lawyers are mean. Defensiveness, misunderstanding. Okay, time is continuing to get big and be central. Debate. Yes, right. Impatient. Ooh. Oh, here comes some more words. Oh, wow. Prioritizing. Having to, okay, winning, personal, misunderstanding. Yeah. Looks like it's separating the words in different phrases, but yeah, time, boy, time is not going away there, is it? Stress, exhausted, prioritizing. If anybody throws in the Q&A, Mike will be on the lookout for that as well. But yeah, this is, wow. Personal things. Now, what is Baba? Somebody may have to expand on that one. Baba Booey. Something is Baba Booey. Okay. Somebody can expand in the chat on Baba Booey.
I guess they wouldn't have meant baby, because that doesn't really have, maybe, I don't know, having a baby might challenge the interpersonal relationship.
Yeah, I also see deadlines. We can be overcommitted. Yeah. Anxiety, defensive is starting to get a little bit more. Balance, prioritization. Wow. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to give it another second, but yeah, that's a lot of good contributions there. Impatient, availability. Second guessing. I see those two words, they're separated, but I bet they go together, and I relate to that one for sure. Yes. Okay, well, those are good. These are a few that we came up with and that we've heard in other times we've done this workshop. The stress we're under, certainly as lawyers. Some people think lawyers have maybe less self-awareness than other professions. I don't know if that's true or not, but I've heard that before. Expectations. Maybe we think things should go better because we're smart, professional, successful. Fatigue, the lawyer personality type. There's all kinds of things in there. And we'll talk about some of those, and we'll get to actually have an opportunity to pull some of that out further. And the point of this is, again, not to be a downer, not to say, hey, man, it's really terrible to be married to a lawyer. We're terrible. We're awful. What we hope you'll be inspired by is we have some advantages and we have some benefits as well. And one of them is because we're communication specialists, we hopefully can sometimes step outside ourselves and think about how a communication is going or how we're talking or how we're interacting, and kind of step above it to try to think about the process and to think about, hey, what would help this conversation be better? So we're going to talk a little bit more about some of the unique challenges that we face and kind of make sure, we all understand the hurdles, the challenge that we have, but also understand some of the benefits and possibilities that we can take advantage of. And to do that, we're going to have an opportunity to watch a film clip that we're going to have you guys have a chance to be able to comment on. And we, as the panelists, are going to comment on as well. This is from a film called Nobody Told Me There'd Be Days Like These. This is an original film that Michael and I wrote and produced about 15 years ago, maybe longer than that, actually. And you're going to meet a young lawyer named Kirk. You don't need to know about his job other than he is a litigation attorney. He's actually on his way to a court hearing, and he pauses to answer the phone in his office as he's on the way out the door. We're going to watch this conversation, and we're going to use it as an opportunity to talk about some of the challenges that this couple is facing, and then maybe hopefully draw some encouragement, inspiration from how to do things a little bit differently. So meet Kirk and Jenny, and it's going to be a difficult conversation. That's all I'm going to tell you.
Hello? Hey, honey, I'm about to head down to court. What's up?
Oh, I was just calling to check to see if you knew when you might be home tonight.
Well, I don't know. I have the Medlin hearing today, plus all the stuff I'm letting go because of the trial and all that, so it's probably going to be pretty late.
Why am I not surprised?
Honey, this is the biggest case of my life. You know everything that is riding on it.
What I know is that you must have forgotten about Caitlin's dance recital again. And what I know is that you promised once again that you would be home in time to help put dinner on the table and get the kids ready to go. What I know is that this is the 4th night this week. You're going to waltz in long after the kids are in bed.
Honey, please don't start. Not today. Remember partnership, dear? Maybe relief from all the pressure, everything that's hanging in the balance. Do you really want me to jeopardize all of that?
What I want is to not be left at home alone raising 3 kids for over 12 hours a day, 7 days a week on my own. What I want is to have a husband that makes promises and he actually cares enough to keep them. And clearly, I don't have that.
Of course I care! Of course I care. Why do you think I'm trying to make a partner in the first place? It isn't because I like these people or this stupid job. We need that money to finish paying off my student loans, to afford to keep the kids in private school, for the kitchen renovations we're gonna do.
Speaking of which, I imagine I'll have to go to the meeting with the architect solo again tomorrow morning, right?
Oh, crap. I completely forgot. Honey, please just let me survive today and I will see what I can do.
Whatever.
Honey, if I can get this case settled, maybe win this motion today, maybe we can go on vacation like we planned next week.
Maybe? That vacation has been planned for months. What are you talking about, maybe?
Well, if the case does not settle, then there's trial and...
Unbelievable. You plan our vacation that I have been counting on all year for the week of the trial. are unbelievable. Are you out of your mind?
Well, I mean, I thought the trial would settle or at least be dismissed. I know it doesn't make any sense, but my client is an idiot and he was freaking out today.
Client might be freaking out, but your wife is cracking up. And do you even care about that at all?
Of course I care. Crud, honey, I really have to go. We'll talk about this later, okay?
You always say that, and we never do. Don't even bother waking me up when you get home tonight.
Sorry for the delay, Jenny.
Yeah, I think we saw most of our comments from the word cloud showing up for sure in that scene. But folks out there in webcast world, if you wouldn't mind, use the Q&A to let us know what resonated with you. What could you relate to about that scene? And while you're doing that, I see some people are mentioning they had some challenges with audio, but then they figured out their volume. So hopefully everybody's coming together on that. But use the QA if you can, and weigh in there kind of what you see going on in this scene, good, bad, or different. But throw it out to Wendy and Michael, our kind of counseling communications expert. How is Kurt doing communicating with his wife? Do you think this is the first time they've had this conversation? What are your observations, just starting maybe with Wendy on how that played out and how what challenges and concerns you might have?
So he's definitely expecting her to roll with the chaos he's living with. And I hear and honor he is living with a lot of pressure. But there are some balls in his family that he's dropping. If it's a multiple dance recitals that he hasn't remembered, vacation now is possibly off the table and it's next week. Yeah. He's definitely pleading with her to just roll with it.
Yeah, and it sounds like kind of kick cans down the road is maybe a common mode of operation for him. Trying to just kind of juggle, and the juggling is not working. Yeah, Michael.
Yeah, and there's clearly a pattern because at the end, or close to the end, he says, "Can we talk about this later?" Or "We'll talk about this later." And she said, "You always say that, but we never do." So that makes it even more frustrating for her. Because when I talk to couples about having conversations, certainly either one of the folks can say this isn't a good time, which is fine, and the time needs to be the right time. But then it's up to that person to say, okay, when is a good time? And he hasn't returned back to the issue with her, and that's I'm sure frustrating for her.
Yeah, so on the way out the door to a hearing is probably not a time to catch him in the best frame of mind, but you can't always have the excuse of, hey, I'm busy. You could do that forever, and that's how a lot of couples end up just not talking and not addressing anything.
Yeah, at the same time, maybe that wasn't the best time to answer the phone either for him, because I know, like, if for me, I had the time zone issue, and you called me and said, "Hey, we're starting," and for me, and I was figuring out how to get online. If my partner called me at that moment, would not have been a good time for me to answer the phone.
She would not have gotten the best Michael, perhaps.
She would not have. No, exactly.
But that, and that's part of the reason that bit's in there. It took us, Winnie and I in particular, a while to learn that there's not always, that you have to actually schedule and plan times to have a disagreement or to work through something, because otherwise you end up having it in these moments when she's really upset, he's really stressed, and you're decreasing the odds of it being a good conversation. And one other question I often ask people is, why do you think they're having this conversation now? What do you think their conversation, if any, was like that morning? And part of in fact, you haven't seen the other scenes that actually set this up, but it's a big trial. It's a big motion day for him. He's got a big client meeting he just had. He's headed to a hearing. He's got a trial next week. And so the reality is they probably didn't get to talk at all in the morning. They kind of passed each other. He may have gotten into the office early. She was getting the kids ready or whatever. And so the reason they're talking about kind of what's on the schedule now is because they haven't been proactive about that. Somebody in the comments said they need a better scheduling system. If she's getting caught off guard by his work obligations, and they're conflicting with planned vacations and that sort of thing, they need to know what's happening. Yeah, they're clearly doing a poor job communicating in general, and then this is everything sort of live, and it's not able to be even a rational conversation. Hey, how can we plan to do this? The next question I had for us to think of, and just the concern we have is if they keep going this way of missing each other, kicking things down the road, and kind of erupting, that's a danger sign. And there's a group called the Gottman Institute that people may have heard of, and they can basically put people in a lab and sort of measured and studied, behavior patterns, communication patterns to determine what couples are likely to make it, survive, and be able to stay in a relationship, and what ones aren't. And one of the big killers in a relationship is contempt, is when they start having just such disgust and hatred, or like, you always say it, we never do. Like, she's giving up hope. That's a danger sign. So we want to watch out for that. What else do you think? And I'll ask a roundtable, and if anybody wants to weigh in Q&A, what else is contributing to their difficulties? How have they made choices prior to this day that are kind of amping up the stress and difficulties for them? Any thoughts on that, Michael or Wendy?
Well, one of the comments I think speaks to that. I'll share their comment overall, but this person said you have to compartmentalize time for work, time for family, and set strict boundaries. Occasionally one invades the other, so I think that's realistic, of course, but most courts honor boundaries. Some legal jobs don't allow this, but then they specifically with regard to this, your question, Chris, rarely is the money needed for a kitchen renovation, vacation, or private school worth the cost. Get a different job. Life is too short.
Oh.
But
well, and
they are setting themselves up with pressure around some of these choices they're making around spending.
Right. Some of the choices they made other days have kind of ramped this up, and we kind of, find him on the verge of, and we haven't heard the rest of the film, but making partner in the firm is really close, and he needs to do it. But you sort of got a hint too of he's kind of doing it for the money, and he kind of lets that slip. He's not super happy doing what he's doing, doesn't like the people. That's a bad sign, and that's a bigger problem than our focus today. But again, this is his social context, though. He and his wife have made these commitments and plans based on a certain set of expectations, but some of those are changing. When can you speak to that, sort of the idea of figuring out what the issues behind the conflict are and how that's sometimes in play?
Yeah, so I think they started out with these desires that they want certain things for their family, for the house they live in, for the education of their kids. And now that they're in the thick of it, he's miserable and she's miserable. So I cannot imagine that the kids are faring well in this. I'm sure that there's conversation about dad's missing it again. We may not go on vacation. And so I just hear resentment building up and lots of anger. And definitely the trust is floundering. Yeah.
Right.
And so now I think now they're seeing each other through more and more negative of a lens.
Yes, yeah. We had a comment that echoes that. Somebody pointed out they're kind of taking a you always, you never kind of dichotomy. They sort of are assuming what the other person's going to say, and they're ready with their, why am I not surprised? Or you always say that, and he's like, don't start, not today. They've sort of been on this horse before. And so it's not just the presenting issue that's there or the decisions they've made, it's the confluence of everything. And again, that's one of the things that it can be really challenging. We as lawyers, we're quick. We can marshal all the arguments. We can think of all the arguments, but sometimes we're kind of flooding them out, and he's sort of trying to defend himself. Look, of course I care. I'm trying to do this. I'm trying to do that. Get off my back, defensiveness, but they're missing each other. So we hope, and think about this, if you want to put this in the Q&A, how can you relate to Kirk or to Jenny? We do encounter some people who want to throw Jenny under the bus. Somebody's like, Jenny just needs to get a job, which is a little harsh, a little much. And she might be a lawyer too. We don't even know. But they've made these choices at this point in time for her to be home and primarily in charge of the kids and schooling and all of that sort of thing. And as Wendy pointed out, they're kind of hitting some disappointment with that. Life isn't looking like they expected it to. That's a challenge we all run into as well. We sort of buy into that, hey, here's the plan, you work hard, you make partner, you're successful, you get this, you get that, and things ought to flow smoothly. I don't know if anybody else has had this experience, but that isn't always how it plays out. In fact, usually when we play this clip for a live audience, there's an audible laugh at that line that says, remember what's on the line? Partnership and a relief from all the stress. And there's usually an audible gasp and laugh, because that's not how it works. Their stress will be there, will be still present. And what we got to do is figure out ways to navigate. So what we want to do is kind of turn our focus then to, for a little bit, to being how can we rethink relational conflict? Not this timing and not this conversation that happened at a terrible time. It's a terrible example on purpose. But what we want to do is try to now flip to how can we look at conflict as a different kind of opportunity and think about it differently so that we can help it to go better and be more productive and less like that. And so first, we want to offer you a few kind of mindset shifts that will help reframe conflict. First of all, it's going to happen. We are going to, if you're in a relationship with another human being, they have desires, you have desires. Unless somebody checks out and isn't showing up or doesn't care, then you're going to have conflict. You're going to have disagreements. It's not there. If you meet anybody, I know if I meet anybody who says, me and my spouse never fight, I'm like, are you alive? Are you paying attention? And it means you heard in this conflict that each of them wants something. They have desires, as Wendy said, hopes, expectations. They're not being met. And it's good. We want to still want things and hope for things. That's not a bad thing. But conflict can be an opportunity then to learn about how to connect with this person and how to care for them. If we can shift our mindset from being, one where I have to defend myself or be right, we might learn something about the other person, and we might learn how to approach it in a way that's less adversarial. A lot of conflict feels like it's win-win. If I win, you have to lose. But there may be ways that they can approach things, and that we can approach things in our relationships that are more win-win. How do we accommodate your interests and my interests? And that can be really hard for us litigators, especially, to sort of get out of that gear of I win, you lose. And so we have some helpful mindset shifts here then that we want to kind of talk you through. And Wendy, if you'll help me sort of amplify some of these, I'll sort of set up the ones that we kind of fall prey to as lawyers, and you can sort of describe in a minute ways to sort of reframe the approach. So I'm even going to change the word goals there. And I'm going to suggest a better word for a conflict or difficult conversation with our significant other partner is desires. A goal, the difference between a goal and desire very quickly is a goal is something that you want, but you can accomplish. Whereas a desire is something you hope for, but you recognize that the power to get it's not in your hands. Quick example, I could desire to be the winner of the Pro Bono Service Award in my local bar next year, but I can't control that. I can't make that happen. I could do 1,000 pro bono hours, but I can't stop the fact that somebody else might do 1,500 pro bono hours. I can desire that. If I make it my goal, I'm going to be in trouble. If it's got to be my goal, I'm going to get frustrated. But if I say that's a desire, now a goal could be, I'm going to do 500 hours of pro bono service and apply for the award. I can control whether I do that or not. So here's some shifts from, first of all, think of them as desires. And instead of ones that we as lawyers typically might default to, at least I'm guilty of, being right, winning, being heard, or being seen as a good guy or a good girl. A lot of what Kurt wants is, hey, of course I care. Don't tell me I don't care. I'm a caring guy. But instead of doing these things, here's some shifts we could make. How about this one, Wen? Instead of winning and getting my way, what's a different way to look at a conflict conversation?
Instead of winning and getting my own way, like how can we both flourish here? How can we both, maybe there's a way to compromise, but how can I hold your needs and desires as well as mine and find a way through that maybe allows us both to receive something?
Yeah. And instead of being right or defending myself, what could a person say differently?
So, I mean, what does my spouse need to grow? What do I need to grow? What does the relationship need to grow. It's really easy to get stuck in being right and lose what is loving.
Yes, yes, that's a great way to look at it. This one was tough for me. I have a real need, as Wendy will tell you, I need to be heard. I want to know that you listen to my brilliant words that I put together to explain myself or defend myself. It used to get me in trouble in court because sometimes when a judge says, you know, that's enough, Mr. Osborne, thank you very much. I'm like, but you're on that. I had to learn to, like, when the judge says no, you're done. But again, instead of being heard, what if I shift to, I want to hear, I want to learn more about what the other person cares about and what they desire. Now that's really hard. When do you have any guidance for people who, if it's a struggle, and you know, how can you make sure that both people get heard? What are some ways to deal with that, since everybody kind of wants that?
Well, I mean, sometimes it can be as easy as setting a timer, which can feel very clinical, but it does ensure that we're turn taking. It sort of sets the stage. And I think also if we can mirror back what we're observing and hearing about the other person, then the time that they are talking really does feel like they're being listened to, because we have a way to mirror back what we have heard they are longing for, disappointed by, or need.
That is a great suggestion. Michael, can you say something? Can you speak to that? What's the value of maybe an active listening approach or a reflecting back approach? What does that do for us in terms of psychologically, emotionally, that sort of thing?
Well, practically it's helpful, and if anybody's been to therapy, hopefully their therapist does a lot of that. Is that you're making sure, if you're the one speaking and the other person is reflecting back, then you're ensuring that your message is being heard. And even if it's not, then you're given the opportunity to clarify. And the mirroring doesn't have to be like a parrot where you're mirroring back every word, because that's a lot of pressure. Plus, if you do the mirroring, you want to do it in chunks. So if you're the person talking, don't talk for 15 minutes and then expect the person to reflect back. Small chunks, and then have the person say, okay, so what I'm understanding is you want to go to your mom's house on Friday and I'll stay with the kids. And she might say, no, I said Saturday.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, Saturday. So it's really just it's a very practical approach to making sure, because communication there are two parts. There's the talking part and the listening part.
Yeah.
And it's making sure that it's working.
And I think that's one of the challenges we have, because we are trained, and we probably are this by nature, but certainly in our legal training, we have been trained how to be heard, how to have the brilliant argument, how to tie it all together. And I don't know about this. I would guess anybody use your Q&A. I didn't do a specific poll on this, but speak up in the Q&A. You can do it anonymously. If you got much instruction in law school on the art of listening, and how to listen and how to listen differently. I got zero, nothing. Even in trial prep, that sort of thing. It was have your questions, answer this, and get the answers and find the data that you want and move on. But listening is an art form that we can develop, and it can still, the thing that helped me a lot when I started actually getting a little bit more serious about learning how to listen is it actually calms you down as well. If you're not trying to think through, oh, wait, I've got 6 rebuttals and 3 answers for that, 3 reasons that's irrelevant. That whole mindset that we are, rightly using in court, rightly using in front of a judge or a jury, it's a lot of work, and it's stressful, and it doesn't get us in the mode of, hey, can I hear? Can I grow? Can I keep us in mind? It sort of feeds that sort of defensiveness.
Chris,
And
it's
so
it's also a lot of work to not respond to. That could be a lot of work to sit and take in what, especially if they're saying something that you feel like you're needing to defend yourself and get your word in, which hopefully that's what will happen. The other person gets their point in, their say, and then at some point you can get to respond. But it can't. I like that second arrow there, learning what I can do to grow and improve relationship. I would say grow not only relationship, but learning what I can do to grow.
Yes, as a person.
By being a better listener. Yeah.
Right. And as we pay attention, we'll talk about this in just a little bit, as we pay attention to what bubbles up and stirs up in us when a conflict happens, we also get data we can learn about ourselves as well. There are things that bother me that might not bother another person. Why do I have those and other people don't? Is a sort of, a data point on ourselves that we can learn and show up differently and better in our relationship. But again, it requires pausing and stepping outside and going, what kind of conversation what kind of conversation do I want to be? The last one we have there too is the idea of, being a good guy or a good girl. I know I can't stand, my intentions being questioned. Wendy will tell you that. But sometimes I need to understand the effect of what I did or didn't do is a problem. It caused harm or it created disappointment. And so if I'm trying to be a good husband or a good guy, that can get me, again, I get in defense mode. I'm like, well, here's 6 reasons, I know I did this, but last week I did it right. And 2 times ago I did it right. And I want to plead my case, not really connecting with the other person very well. If you change that simple shift in, I want to love my wife well, or I want to love my husband well, or I want to connect with them in this conversation. If we change to that, the goal is different. It's not about whether I'm coming across or being perceived that way. It's how do they feel about it? And that means I might listen to their data and their feedback, and we might actually connect and learn something. And the last thing I'll point out is just the thing that we can fall into just real quickly. What do you think the real F word is? In this case, it's fair. And it's what I see a lot in my work as a mediator and as a conflict resolution expert. Of course, anybody starts on, but this isn't fair. This isn't fair and right. That's really, nobody's ever going to see it as fair. It's really not going to resolve out the same way typically. And for people to think of it as fair, it's a reason that that's a kid's word that they pull out. I have another poll here real quick. I'd love for people to just share, go back to the poll Ev app that you went to on your phone or on your laptop. There should be another question there. What are the 3 most common things that you and your spouse, partner, or significant other fight about? And if you just do try to use 1-word or 2-word phrase answers, they'll aggregate a little bit better. Dinner, there's the first one up. Dinner time. Okay, great. Attention. Okay. The words are piling in. I love to see that happen. Weekend, kids. Yes. Time is getting bigger again. Scheduling. Yes. Blame. Sure. Trust. Plans, housework, weekend priorities, childcare.
I'd want to know what they mean by time too, and that can mean a number of different things. Like
True.
time
Quantity,
together.
quality.
Yeah.
How we're going to spend it. Do we have it?
Yeah.
Priorities, attention. Yes. Okay. These are similar to the kind of things we see when we ask this question. So the reason I bring this up is because there's another interesting statistic from the Gottman Institute. What they have identified in studying thousands of couples that they have worked with is 70%, almost 70% of the conflict in relationships is unsolvable. What they mean by that is there's not a right or wrong answer. There's not a definitive, you have to do this or else, death and destruction result. Most of what we actually argue about is not something that is susceptible to a I win and you lose kind of thing. There are valid perspectives on both sides. There are competing priorities that need to be dealt with. And we mention that because, again, it can be a good pause, a good thing to remind ourselves as lawyers, this isn't like a court case. This isn't where I think justice needs to be this, or my side should win, or here's the best way to do this. A lot of this, there's a lot of subjectivity to it. And therefore, kind of getting on that train of who's right or more right, or who's got the better defense, it isn't really going to make sense anyway. And so solvable, that's one question that the Gottman Institute sort of recommends. Identify what kind of issue is this? Is this a solvable problem? Or is this something that is more relational? It's more perpetual. We're going to keep running into this. And how do we approach that? And again, without this, I've got to win mindset or you've got to lose mindset. Wendy, anything to add to that? Am I doing that justice?
Yeah, you're doing a great job on that. Yeah, that I mean, we tend to argue thinking that we're gonna achieve something. And usually it's being right, but even when we're right, it's rarely satisfying. Like what we're wanting with our spouse is connection.
Mm.
And I think that we think it will come through solving the argument, but it really is going to come through turning toward each other and finding ways to love each other that are meaningful.
Yes, and you can have that sort of mindset too. And I like to promote this idea when I speak with different kinds of groups as well, non-lawyers as well. But like just this idea that hey, we are on the same team, even if we have this problem to solve. The marriage is or the coupleship, the committed relationship. This is the team, and we should remember that we want to be on the same team as each other, even if we have a problem to solve. Kind of like all the players, like on a soccer team or a basketball team. If they start infighting with one another, they're going to get beat up by everything from the outside. Eventually, they got to deal with problems that arise from the perspective of okay, we got to work through this, but we're ultimately want the same things. Generally, we want our family to thrive and flourish. One other point that Wendy and I would like to make as well, or that we'd all like to make as well, is this idea. And we saw this in Kirk and Jenny's situation as well. It's not just the presenting trigger or issue. I've got a little image here from, you've probably heard of kind of call before you dig campaigns. In a lot of places you can call 811 before you start digging up your yard, find out what kind of pipes and things are running underneath it so you don't chew up some wires or something like that. In this case, in the case of relationships, conflict tends to land on something else as well. It's not just what happened with the dishes or what happened with forgetting the dance recital or you missed this or you forgot me on that. We all come into our relationships with a story, with a backstory, with things that have happened to us before. Like I said, being heard is really important to me because there are significant events in my life where I wasn't heard, where my voice didn't count. A lot of people describe having that experience. Actually, spoiler alert, it's what drives a lot of us to be lawyers, isn't it? I get a microphone, I get an opportunity to persuade a court that I'm right and that I'm brilliant, right? It's very appealing to those of us who maybe didn't have that experience when we felt like we needed it growing up, or maybe we did have it and we learned this is really great. But so thinking about what is behind the surface or what's under the surface is often important. We don't have a lot of time to go into that and to kind of show you how that works today. But Wendy, do you have anything you wanted to add on that, in particular ways that we can kind of watch out for the story elements and kind of wield them better as we are in relationship with one another?
Yeah, well, first we've got to know these stories. We've got to really know each other. What's our history with disappointment? What's our history with being heard? What's our history with being seen? That would be the opposite of neglect. What is our history with anger? How did our parents relate to us when we failed? So we've got to know the stories before we know what to do with the stories. Because a lot of times a trigger in marriage will step right on top of an early formative event. And so suddenly, if you tell me that I'm failing you, it takes me back to this early time where I failed and I'm covered in shame. And it's going to come out as deep anger at you for seeing me in that.
Yeah, it's usually a good sign when we run into anger or a defensive response that feels like really disproportionate to maybe what the immediate event calls for. That might be an encouragement to look at, whoa, what was that about? Where did that land on? I remember some of my time in marriage counseling many years ago and still working through, yeah, Chris, when have you felt like that before? And I hadn't stopped to think about that. When have you felt not listened to? When have you gotten angry because you're not being heard and wanted to smash things? I'm like, oh, that happened other times too. Yeah. Okay. Let's figure that out. Michael, anything to add on that particular topic from your perspective?
Not really. I think that's really well said, Wendy, what you were saying. I would say, and the importance of that awareness is then to be able to disconnect that old stuff from what's going on in the present in your relationship, to say, okay, this is what Wendy, if we use you and Chris, you and Wendy, what Wendy is saying, this reminds me of some old stuff with my mom.
Yeah.
Wendy is not my mom. That's old stuff.
Yes.
And be able to separate, then you can have the more appropriate reaction. It still might be something you're concerned about, but a more appropriate reaction that is more something that can be attended to.
Yeah. And as Wendy said, there's a lot of value in being able to revisit what were those moments? Where did I
Yeah.
feel missed or hurt by somebody?
Sure.
And I have to kind of deal with and grieve what happened, whatever it was in my relationship with my mom or whoever, so that I can know, okay, that was then, but I'm an adult now and I'm in a different
Right.
place now.
That's right.
So for our last few 15 minutes we have here, we want to get a little bit more practical as well and talk about a few other strategies that you can use once you have these mindset shifts. The mindset shifts kind of have to happen first. You have to want to have a different outcome than just winning. You have to want to have a different outcome than just looking good or being able to defend your position. But once you start looking at conflict differently and approaching it differently as an opportunity, then there's some tips and techniques that will help with that. We're actually going to play you a clip now from another film that Michael and I did this past year called Is It Over Yet? It's about practicing law post-pandemic. And so you're going to see a couple here. They are actually both lawyers. They're married to one another. And they are having a particular conversation about something that's come up recently, and they're going to have it over Zoom, which ought to feel really familiar as we watch this. And then we'll talk about it and kind of highlight some of the things they do well and some of the things maybe that they could even do differently. But it's a less painful, I hope, conversation than the one we just saw. So meet Sydney and Charlie, lawyers married to each other.
So can we talk about the other thing?
Yeah.
Okay, so what exactly were you doing watching a YouTube video about Miley Cyrus's wardrobe malfunction at some New Year's Eve celebration in Miami?
I was mainly watching Pete Davidson, who's co-host. I know. It's not funny. Honestly, I swear, hon, I hadn't slipped up like this in a long time.
Charlie, this is your work computer. And you just had it right there on the table, unlocked in the living room. I mean, what if Olivia had gone in the living room and seen that or something else? What is going on with you?
I don't know. It's just been so, I mean, it's not an excuse, but it's been just stressful, all right? With being at home, and I don't mean anything bad about the kids or anything, but you know me, okay? You know, I'm an extrovert. I get my energy from being around people, but now I don't see anybody. I'm talking to people on screen all day or just sitting inside. Lonely. You and I, we hang out with the kids. We don't get any time, just the two of us, by ourselves.
I know. I guess I would, feel weird if you happen upon my phone and saw all the Amazon purchases I've been making and having the driver hide in the bushes.
Mm-hmm.
This is really something that we need to talk about and keep your eye on in the future. I mean, Charlie, I need to know that I'm your only girl.
I know, babe, and I promise you are. This thing is, I swear, it's not about you. It's not.
I know you say that, but sometimes it's just really hard to believe.
I know. Can we talk about this later? Maybe we can talk about what I need to do. Me talking with the fellas again. I'll let them know what's up.
Well, yeah, you said that you would talk to Jay anytime something like this came up again.
I know. I will. I really, I will. I'm sorry.
I know. I mean, we'll be all right. I'll be home soon. I'm still at the office. I'm in the parking lot. Oh, Charlie, where'd your video go? Oh, there you go. I don't know if you heard me. I said that I'm still at work. I'm in the parking lot, but I'm about to pull out, so I'll be home soon.
Okay. Yeah, I'll get Olivia inside here in just a little bit, and then I've got Oscar sent out an email or some kind of emergency all firm Zoom meeting at 5, so I'm gonna have to dial back in for that later. I'll see you when I get home. Okay. Love you.
Okay, I'll see you about 6, and we will be finishing this conversation. I love you too. Bye.
Okay, tougher conversation there in a different way. But and leaving aside, of course, you know, it's awkward they're having this by Zoom or FaceTime. An obvious thing, maybe this is a better matter for a direct conversation when you're together. Let's name that to start with for sure. But what things do you all see? And please put in the Q&A, folks out there in webcast world. We've got a couple comments that are good coming in as well that we'll get to. But if you all would comment on this, and Wendy and then Michael, what do you all see this couple doing well? What were some things that they did well in this scene as they talk about this difficult subject?
Well, she brought it up, which I appreciated. She brought it up. She said the other thing, but she did bring it up. He did not try to defend. He did waffle a little. He had promised he would do something, but as far as what he did well, he said, "You're right. And I will continue to hear from you what I need to do." So he wasn't defensive.
Yeah, and I appreciate that he tried to put some context to it because she's saying what's going on. I liked her question, even though it was, had some energy to it, but she's like, what's up? This doesn't seem like you. It's not what you want. And she gave him a chance to kind of answer that. And he, to his credit, at least, he named something. And gosh, it's an appropriate topic to think about for Social Day of Wellbeing Week. He said, loneliness is a real issue now that I'm stuck working from home. And I know that, gosh, there's just a big feature study, I believe, or article in the New York Times about, the Surgeon General just came out with something that talks about just the deadliness of loneliness and how difficult, how that contributes to people's, well-being. But he put some real stuff out there. He was willing to be a little bit vulnerable, but also willing to kind of own what happened. What about you, Michael? Did you see anything else that you'd give them sort of, some points for the way they're trying to communicate about this?
Well, she was generous in sharing some of her own foibles.
Yep.
In terms of the Amazon purchases. So
Yes.
she could have made it just about why, what the behavior that he was doing that she was not happy with. And then she said, okay, I'll own up to some of the stuff I'm doing. So it made it more of for maybe an easier discussion for Charlie.
Yeah, you could see him relax as she said that. Yeah. The other thing I love where she said too, like, hey, we're going to be okay. We're going to get through this. There was a little statement of, I'm still for you. I'm not happy with this, but there was that sort of same team moment. Like, I'm still for you and we're going to be okay. And I know for me, especially, that's because of my story, that's a super valuable aspect of things. That's a super helpful thing for me to hear. And then I can not get on that, triggered state of, oh crap, everything's falling apart and I'm going to be alone.
Right. Speaking of old, if you have older issues about abandonment, if we go back to that, what we just talked about earlier, that could be a real trigger for him. So for her to kind of ease his concern about that, we're going to be okay. This is something that I'm not happy with, but our relationship is solid.
Yeah. Whereas sometimes when we're so upset, we're so mad, we want to hurt sometimes, and we want to say, forget it. I'm not even going to stick around for this, or I'm, not going to take this, or you're a rat bastard, or you're terrible, or you're a bad word, whatever. We had a great comment from one attendee that I wanted to highlight real quick. This person said, Wendy's comment about knowing about each other struck home. I'm newly remarried and my new spouse said exactly the same thing when I tried to explain why I took offense to how he behaved recently. Once I put it out there about my past and said, I don't want to tell him what happened because it's in the past and not pleasant information to share, he insisted so that he could understand my reaction. I shared and it opened a whole discussion and brought us closer. I'm not used to showing the person who really loves me this time around the scars from birth through literally the date of my divorce 52 years later. He shares too, and I've truly never felt more closely connected to and loved by another human, let alone my spouse. Wow, that's gold, y'all. That's why we love hearing from you guys out there. That's That's beautiful. You learn things and you learn ways that you can love better. So kind of as we wrap up, we've got about 5 minutes here. We want to kind of put sort of a fine point on some practical communication skills that we can use when we have that mindset, when we want to learn, we want to grow, we want to support one another in a different way, and we're not trying to be right and win the argument. If you all have suggestions as well, we loved, again, that was just a great thing, and we want to hear more from you guys if you have ideas. The first is, and we made a couple allusions to it, the importance of setting and timing. Michael talked about that when we talked about Kirk and Jenny's conversation. That's not a great time for that conversation. We need to be purposeful about planning a time. And if we are saying, hey, it can't be now. I remember Wendy and I didn't know for the first probably 5-6 years of our marriage that you could take a time out, that you could say, can we pause this and come back later? We didn't have that tool at all. We just thought you had to kind of hash through everything and not stop until you worked it out. And that left us sometimes exhausted enough really late into the night. And it didn't get any better as we got later. So thinking about planning for, being purposeful about it. Hey, we're going to set aside time. We're going to need to set aside time to talk about things that we are frustrated or having difficulty with. Because if not, it's going to come out sideways. It's going to come out when people aren't prepared and can't bring their best selves. We talked a little bit about the power of listening and the idea of active listening. My legal career, and I think my marriage, got better about 15 years ago or so when I read an article called How to Take Better Depositions and Possibly Improve Your Marriage. It's an article by Woody Connett, who's actually practiced law here in Charlotte, published in the ABA Journal of Litigation. But active listening, we don't have time to train it and kind of go through it, but it's basically what we were talking about earlier, asking more curiosity questions, listening to the answer and asking a follow-up. Oh, what was that like? Huh? Oh my gosh, how did that feel? It's another tool in addition to the mirroring and reflecting back, but making sure that you're heard. Say, do I have that right? Do I understand what you're saying? Active listening. We talked about it. I just said the idea of timeouts and sometimes getting rest and saying, can we let this, like Charlie does at the end there, can we come back to this? And again, not making that excuse and never coming back to it, because that will have its own bad results. Taking turns. Wendy referred to that earlier. Sometimes maybe setting a timer. We've actually had to do that. Like, when can I have my time? When can I have your time? And when you're both hurting and you're both really feeling something, it's really hard. But if you know that's going to come, if you know you're both going to get a chance, then you can sort of say, okay, let you have your say. And this is where our training as lawyers can help us, because we're used to, hey, look, the plaintiff gets to put on their case, the defense gets to put on their case. Everybody has a chance to get heard. Sometimes you have to wait. I've defended a number of cases. I've tried a number of cases as the defense, and it's hard to sit there and listen to the plaintiff say their whole case and not get to say very much, but you always know it's going to come back around. So we can actually leverage a strength there. And Wendy, can you talk then about what's the idea of scaffolding? If you have difficult conversations, harder things to talk about, what are ways that couples can sort of prepare for that to navigate those better?
So I love your graphic of the building, because you've got to go up kind of level by level. Like if you jump into the most intense, somebody's going to fall, right? So you kind of take some steps up. So first, Jenny was super disappointed about the vacation. Okay. So maybe a step beyond that is she feels like he is working too hard, not prioritizing. Okay, so maybe past that, she's got some stories with her family of origin where she was not prioritized. Maybe a little bit past that is she doesn't even know if he's really in the marriage, right? But if she jumps to, I don't even think you're serious about this marriage and this family, which she kind of did, then his response is going to be to defend himself. So if we kind of start and work our way up, which means we got to do something with the anger before we come together. Yeah, which is, probably the hardest thing in my opinion.
Yes, and that's related to a comment we have from the Q&A. What do you do when the other person blows up and closes communication? And that's one principle that goes with what Wendy's alluding to. We can only manage our own response, our own anger level. It's very tempting to want to manage the other person's and say, you're a little angry, you're being too difficult about this. But really, at the end of the day, each person's ability to stay in the conversation, their resilience is their own job. And we each need to manage ourselves and try to say, hey, I need to be in the right frame of mind to continue this conversation. So that's where timeouts are like something that we take for ourselves or ask for, not you need a timeout because you're out of control. And so when
Right.
somebody blows up and closes communication, one, well, sometimes you're going to have to wait. You might have to wait until they calm down, or wait until give them a chance to, to say what they need to say.
Yeah, I was going to suggest, I was actually typing an answer to that, but I was going to suggest too that certainly wait for a cooling off period, but then approach the person again, but maybe have the discussion in a different place, maybe not in the house, maybe going for a walk. Side to side discussions can sometimes feel safer for folks because you're not looking at each other. And so wait for a time where the cooling off has happened and it's a good time for both of you.
And last plug, if it's really hard and you're running into really difficult, intractable conflict and these things aren't working and you keep running into the same problems and going in circles, that's where, again, counseling, people at the LAP program at New Jersey LAP, especially, they have resources. They can find you somebody to sit and just be, it's almost like a referee, but not quite. They're not a referee. They're not going to say who's right and wrong. They're going to just make sure that everybody gets heard. They can enforce that turn taking, and they can help you. The best part of all, somebody like Wendy or Michael can help see what we don't see and see those dynamics, see those points of story connections, see those ways that we're talking with each other that aren't helping towards the goal. So that's our time here. I want to turn it over to Nicole at New Jersey LAP. Thank you again for having us to speak here. And they have a few, just a closing bit of information. And thank you all for being with us as well. We appreciate it greatly.
I just wanted to thank you for coming today and taking the time to provide us with some additional tools to have better relationships. I know I definitely learned something. I also wanted to thank the attendees for coming, and if they would like to go back and watch this again, or let their friends, come and see this as well, it will be available on the New Jersey LAP's YouTube channel. So thank you, and I hope everyone has a great rest of their day.
Thanks so much.
Thanks.
Thank you.